First of all, the Gulu meeting was more than human rights. The question of the economic revitalization of northern Uganda
Yes.
Was discussed. You saw the ambassadors riding
Bicycles.
electric bikes in town, promoting green energy and all that kind of stuff. So there's so much in the Gulu meeting. It's a shame that it has now been completely overtaken by a small bit of what was part of a wider meeting. And I think part of the reason the ambassadors saw it fit to see Saleh is that a lot of the economic activities in the north is being done through Operation Wealth Creation. And I think there was need to find some sort of linkage, synergies between the efforts of the different parties. And that's why perhaps they found their way to General Saleh. But two things really are important to say here. First is that we must conduct diplomacy in the conventional way of conducting diplomacy. The statement of the UPDF is perhaps an overzealous statement because they have no powers to sever diplomatic relations and ties, whether it is in terms of sharing intelligence information, military support. It's not their place. I think that they are shooting above their weight. They would rather stick to the government systems and in dealing with matters of diplomacy, because it has far-reaching ramifications. I mentioned to you the deep ties, the deep economic ties between the governments of Uganda and the government of Germany.
Yeah.
The peoples of this country have deep ties with each other. So, but Andrew is absolutely right. Aid is not innocent. Andrew has made this point for a very long time, that aid is not innocent, okay? But also he's right that the international system is far from perfect. The disagreement I have with him is that we might use the imperfection of the international system to diminish the pains and suffering of people in this country who are crying for help, who are being tortured, and have nowhere else to run. When the army commander boasts about your torture in his basement, you go before court and you see your way that man appears in court, and the courts remand you. Really, any means to try and draw attention to your issue must not be diminished because the system raising it is imperfect. We can have a different debate about the role of the international community, its role in promoting wars and sufferings in many parts of the world. That debate will go on forever. But we cannot use that to diminish the pain and suffering of people who are facing torture in this country in the hands of some elements of our state. The second thing is to say is that accusations about subversive activities are not new, especially as we approach elections. In the last election, the Ugandan state accused diplomats, the EU diplomats, of promoting subversive activities. They actually expelled staff members of this diplomatic mission. Andrew knows a mutual friend called Simon Osborne, who was leading the EU election program. He was expelled from this country because he was accused of being involved in subversive activities. Organizations that receive donor support from these EU missions had their accounts frozen, had their EDs arrested. You had, for instance, the basket fund, the donor basket fund that was used to fund a lot of work in this country. Some of it was funding the Human Rights Commission, institutions of Parliament. The DGF was accused of being involved in all manners of things and shut down. So the accusations of subversive activities, especially as we approach elections, are not new. What is common about these accusations is that there's no iota of evidence adduced to prove the accusations that are recklessly dished out in this kind of times. And so I'm not surprised that the UPDF, after the Gulu meeting, now spring up what they call the involvement of the ambassador in subversive activities. In my view, I think it is complete gamesmanship, because they may have been upset by his... If you know a German, you know the German speaks straight to you. The Germans and the Dutch are known for very frank conversations, and I know the German ambassador for being very frank, even with those of us who are not on the other side of the divide, that he's very frank, he's very straightforward, and he's sometimes as forceful as Andrew in making his point. And now that he makes that point, all of a sudden we spring up these accusations. There's every reason to suspect that that is because of the stand he's took in Gulu. So accusations of interference in subversive activities are not new, especially during elections. My view is that any person in charge of the state would want to have an intelligence system. That accusations that they make must be backed up by evidence. They had better have it. But if consistently you have accusations that have no basis. This week we had arrests and convictions of people involved in the murder of Joan Kagezi.
Yes.
20 minutes after Joan was murdered, the IGP turned up there and accused ADF of killing Joan Kagezi. So we make very broad accusations, not backed by any evidence. The evidence now before the court is that some retired UPDF officer has now pleaded guilty to his role in that murder. The evidence is now that you have a senior police officer being arrested and accused of being involved in that murder. So intelligence operations and systems must try and be a little bit more intelligent in the way they collect, collate, and analyze intelligence. If you spew this kind of falsehood all the time, you make people in power make wrong decisions, because the president is only as good as the information he gets. If he gets wrong information, he will make wrong decisions. And so my plea is that we've got to step back from this UPDF enthusiasm of claiming to severe ties with a foreign country over relations that they didn't sign. It's not their role. It is bringing this casual mentality to a rather serious debate. The second thing is that, and it is good that the EU and the diplomats have chosen a different path. You've seen the German government responding to the Ugandan government. It is not the German Ministry of Defense. And so let's use the official channel. If Chris Magezi thinks that there's an official channel, there was no need for him to interfere and announce a severing of relations with the German government.
Thank you.